The stagecoach rattled through the red dust of Copper Ridge, its wheels clattering against the uneven trail. Inside, Eleanor Ashford gripped her satchel tight against her lap. The Boston banker's daughter had never seen land so wide, so wild, or so empty. The endless stretch of prairie made her feel small, as if the world had suddenly grown larger than her courage. Her father had sent her here with one purpose: to restore the Ashford name. His debts had ruined them, and now his only daughter was to secure a marriage that would bring respect and money back to their family. Eleanor had begged to stay in Boston, where life was orderly and predictable, but her father's words still echoed in her mind. "Marry well, Eleanor. The Chamberlain brothers own half this territory. Choose wisely, and all will be well." When the stage finally stopped outside the Copper Ridge Hotel, Eleanor stepped down into the blinding sun. Her fine traveling dress, perfect for Boston parlors, was already coated in dust. The air was hot and dry, carrying the faint smell of horses and wood smoke. The town itself looked half asleep, a cluster of weathered buildings leaning into the wind, their paint long since bleached by the relentless sun. Then she saw them. Two men stood across the street, outside the saloon, identical in every feature. Tall, broad-shouldered faces tanned by years under the western sun, the Chamberlain twins. Even from a distance, their presence drew the eye. They looked like they belonged to the land itself, strong, untamed, and unyielding. Eleanor froze, her heart hammering. She had expected refined gentlemen, not these towering cowboys who looked more like outlaws than suitors. Both men turned their heads in unison, their gazes finding her through the haze of dust. For one breathless second, it felt as if the entire town had gone still. The first twin removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. He smiled, faint but sure, as though he already knew her. The second twin didn't move, only watched, his eyes darker, sharper, filled with quiet intensity. The hotel keeper's voice broke the moment. "Miss Ashford, your room's ready. Your father sent word ahead." Eleanor forced herself to turn away to follow the man inside, though she could still feel their eyes on her back. Inside the small room, she sank onto the bed and tried to steady her shaking hands. She had been in Copper Ridge for less than 10 minutes, and already everything felt different. The air itself seemed charged, alive, whispering that she was far from the world she had known. Through the thin glass window, she peeked out again. The brothers were still there, leaning against the saloon's porch rail, talking in low voices. When they both looked up at once, Eleanor stepped back quickly, her pulse racing. That night, she lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of the town, boots on the boardwalk, laughter from the saloon, the soft whine of wind through the cracks in the shutters. Boston had been quiet, predictable, but this place, it pulsed with danger and possibility. She thought of the twins again, the warmth in one man's smile and the quiet storm in the other's eyes. She had no idea which brother her father intended her to marry, but deep down she feared and hoped that choice might no longer be hers to make. By morning, Eleanor had dressed carefully in a dark green traveling suit, one of the few fine things she still possessed. The letter of introduction her father had written sat folded in her satchel. When the hotel keeper told her the Chamberlain brothers visited town most mornings, she thanked him and set out, determined to face them on her own terms. The sun was already high, and the town buzzed with movement. Wagons rumbling past, shopkeepers sweeping dust from their steps, horses tied outside every storefront. Eleanor tried to walk with purpose, though she felt every eye on her. In Boston, she had been admired. Here, she was something else entirely, a curiosity. When she reached the feed store, she hesitated at the doorway. Then she saw them again, the Chamberlain brothers, standing near the back, discussing a coil of rope. Up close, they seemed even larger, the air around them charged with quiet strength. The one with the sky-colored eyes looked up first, his gaze locked onto hers, recognition flickering. Then the other turned, and together they faced her. "Miss Ashford," the first said, his voice deep, with a hint of a smile. "Word travels fast in Copper Ridge." Eleanor tried to steady her breathing. My father sent me to deliver a letter, she managed, her voice softer than she wished. He extended a large, calloused hand. Caleb Chamberlain, he said. And this is my brother Jacob. Jacob inclined his head but said nothing, his eyes studying her like he was trying to read her soul. Eleanor handed Caleb the letter, careful not to let her hands tremble. He unfolded it, scanning the words quickly before tucking it into his vest. So Caleb said finally, his tone unreadable, "You've come a long way from Boston, Miss Ashford. Your father's asking a lot." Eleanor met his gaze, her spine straight. "I'm aware, but I make my own choices." Jacob's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "That's good," he said, his deep voice startling her. "Out here, only strong choices last." For the first time since leaving home, Eleanor felt something inside her shift, a spark of pride, maybe courage. She didn't yet know what the Chamberlain brothers wanted or what she wanted from them, but she knew this much. Life in the West would not be about survival alone. It would be about finding her place, even if it meant rewriting all the rules she'd ever known. And somewhere deep down, she sensed that whatever future waited for her in Copper Ridge, it began with these two men. The morning air was warm, and the smell of hay and horses filled the street as Eleanor stepped out of the feed store. Her heart still beat hard against her ribs. Meeting the Chamberlain twins had shaken her more than she cared to admit. Caleb's easy charm had unsettled her, but it was Jacob's silence, that calm, measuring gaze, that haunted her most. By noon, word had spread. A stranger from Boston had arrived, daughter of a ruined banker, rumored to be looking for a husband. Copper Ridge was a small town. Secrets here were shorter-lived than a shadow at high noon. As she walked back toward the hotel, she heard the whispers. "That's her," one woman murmured. "The banker's girl, come west to marry for money." Eleanor lifted her chin and kept walking. She would not let gossip decide her worth. Not here. Not again. Inside the hotel, the keeper handed her a folded note sealed with a rough thumbprint, delivered by one of the Chamberlain hands. He said, curious eyes following her as she climbed the stairs. In her room, she broke the seal. The handwriting was bold, slanted. "Miss Ashford, my brother and I invite you to dine with us at the ranch this evening. We believe we owe you proper hospitality, and there is much to discuss regarding your father's letter. C. Chamberlain." Eleanor read it twice, her pulse quickening. She wasn't naive. A dinner invitation from two unmarried men was far from proper. But this was not Boston. This was the West, where the lines between propriety and survival blurred with every mile of dust. By late afternoon, a wagon arrived for her, sturdy, simple, and driven by a ranch hand who tipped his hat politely but said little. The road to the Chamberlain ranch stretched wide and golden beneath the sinking sun. When the house finally came into view, Eleanor drew a sharp breath. It was enormous by frontier standards, 2 stories of solid timber, surrounded by acres of rolling grassland and grazing cattle. Caleb was waiting at the porch, his sleeves rolled, his shirt dusted with the day's work. He smiled as he helped her down from the wagon. "Welcome to Chamberlain Ranch, Miss Ashford. I hope the ride wasn't too rough." "Only long," she said, glancing past him toward the stables, where Jacob stood tending a horse. His broad frame caught the light, his movements deliberate, powerful. He looked up, met her eyes briefly, then returned to his work. Inside, the house surprised her. It was clean and well kept, filled with the scent of pine and smoke. The long table was set simply, roasted meat, bread, and vegetables. No servants, no silver, just honest food and honest men. Over dinner, conversation turned to her father's letter. Caleb spoke first. "He's asked us to consider a partnership, land, investments, marriage. The 3 are tied together." Eleanor swallowed. "And what do you think of such arrangements?" Caleb's eyes softened. "I think your father's a practical man, but I also think he underestimates you." Jacob set down his cup, his deep voice cutting through the quiet. "A man's debts are his own. You shouldn't have to pay them." Eleanor met his gaze, steady this time. In Boston, that's not how the world works. Daughters often pay for their fathers' mistakes. Then, maybe it's time the world worked differently, Jacob said. The rest of the meal passed with easier conversation. They spoke of the ranch, the drought the year before, the coyotes that prowled too close, the promise of the next cattle drive. Caleb had a way of making her laugh without meaning to, while Jacob's few words carried weight that lingered long after they were spoken. When the plates were cleared, Caleb leaned back in his chair. You came here expecting to make a business arrangement, Miss Ashford, but we don't do things halfway. Out here, life's too short for half measures. Eleanor's brow furrowed. Half measures? Jacob rose, his chair scraping lightly against the wood floor. He means that we don't offer convenience. If we welcome someone into our family, it's for life, through dust, storm, or worse. Caleb nodded. We built this ranch together, Jacob and I. Every board, every fence post. We don't divide what we've built. Eleanor looked between them, realizing for the first time what they were saying, not with words, but with presence. Two men bound by loyalty stronger than blood, who shared everything, work, land, and maybe even something more unspoken. The realization made her breath hitch. And you think I belong in that life? Caleb's smile returned, faint but sincere. We think you could. You've got spirit. And we respect that. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. When Caleb offered his arm to walk her to the wagon, she hesitated. I can find my way, she said. I know you can, he replied, still offering his hand. But out here, it's good to have someone beside you. Even the strong need that sometimes. For a long moment, she studied him. The honesty in his eyes, the steadiness of his hand, then took it. The wagon rolled away through the twilight, the Chamberlain ranch fading behind her. Eleanor's heart felt heavier and lighter all at once. She had come to the West to fulfill a duty. But tonight, for the first time, she wondered if she had come for something else entirely. The sun was rising over Copper Ridge, turning the grasslands into rivers of gold. A warm wind moved across the valley, carrying the scent of sage and horses. Eleanor Ashford stood on the porch of her hotel, holding her father's letter one last time before folding it neatly back into her satchel. She was no longer the same woman who had stepped off that stagecoach days ago. Something in her had changed, hardened, maybe strengthened, in the presence of the Chamberlain twins. A rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast. She recognized the tall figure even before the horse slowed. Caleb Chamberlain, his hat tipped low, his expression calm but determined. He dismounted with practiced ease and climbed the steps toward her. Miss Ashford, he greeted, his voice steady. Jacob and I would like you to visit the ranch again. There's something we need to say face to face. Eleanor hesitated only a moment before nodding. She had questions, too. Questions that kept her awake long after the lamps went dark. The ride back was silent, but not uncomfortable. The land stretched endlessly around them, and Eleanor couldn't help but feel small in its vastness, and yet somehow freer than she had ever felt in Boston's narrow streets. When they reached the ranch, Jacob was waiting near the corral. He wiped his hands on a cloth, his face unreadable as always, though his eyes softened slightly when he saw her. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Inside, the brothers led her to the porch. The view stretched for miles. Open land, a river winding through the far valley, cattle scattered like tiny figures on a living map. Caleb leaned against the railing, folding his arms. Eleanor, we're not men who speak much in circles. You came here because your father asked for help, and we gave our word we'd consider it. But what we're offering now goes beyond that. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Beyond? Jacob nodded. We're offering you a home, a life here with us. Not because of your father's debts, but because we see something in you. Strength, heart, and honesty. You've got the kind of courage this land needs. Her breath caught. You're asking me to stay? Quote. Caleb's eyes softened. We are. The words hung in the air between them. The prairie wind whispered through the porch railings, filling the silence with its soft song. Eleanor looked out over the horizon, endless, untamed and wild. She thought of Boston's ballrooms and polite conversations, of a life filled with rules and expectations. That world had never felt like hers. But this place, this harsh, demanding land, had already begun to shape her into something new. "I don't know if I belong here," she said finally. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Jacob's deep voice cut through her doubt. "You're stronger than you think." Caleb smiled faintly. "And as for belonging, you already do." Eleanor turned to face them both, searching their expressions. What she saw wasn't a promise of ease, but of truth, of long days, hard work, and the kind of love that required grit more than charm. "I don't want to be another deal struck between men," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "If I stay, it has to be my decision, my life." Jacob stepped closer, his tone soft but sure. "Then make it yours." She looked from one brother to the other, two men so alike and yet so different. Caleb the steady light, Jacob the quiet storm. Together they represented everything the West demanded: courage, loyalty, and an unspoken faith that family could be built from choice, not blood. Eleanor drew a slow breath. "All right," she said. "I'll stay, but not as a bargain. I'll stay because I choose to build something real, with you if you'll have me." Caleb's answering smile was small but full of relief. "That's all we ever wanted to hear." Jacob nodded, his eyes bright despite his stoic face. "Then it's settled. You belong here now." The wind lifted her hair as she stepped closer to the railing, gazing out over the sprawling ranch that would now be her home. The land stretched endlessly before her, wild, unpredictable, and breathtakingly alive. That evening, the three of them stood together on the porch as the sun sank into the horizon. The sky burned with color, orange, crimson, and gold, as if the heavens themselves were painting their beginning. Eleanor felt the weight of her old life fall away, replaced by something fierce and certain. She had found more than refuge. She had found purpose, and a family carved from the dust and heart of the frontier. The banker's daughter from Boston had come west to escape ruin. Instead, she had discovered who she truly was. As the first stars appeared, Caleb spoke softly beside her. "The West has a way of testing people, but those who stay, those who fight for it, find everything they were meant to be." Eleanor smiled, the wind tugging at her hair. "Then I suppose I was meant to be here." And as the night settled over Copper Ridge, the Chamberlain Ranch glowed warm against the dark. A light on the frontier, marking the beginning of a new story, built on trust, courage, and the kind of love that endured, like the land itself.
The stagecoach rattled through the red dust of Copper Ridge, its wheels groaning over the uneven trail. Inside, Blainer Ashford clutched her satchel to her chest as though it were the only solid thing left in her world. The banker's daughter from Boston had never seen land so vast, so unforgiving. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, making her feel small, exposed like the earth itself was daring her to turn back. Her father's voice echoed in her thoughts, as sharp and relentless as the sun beating down on the coach roof. "Marry well, Leaner. The Chamberlain brothers own half this territory. Choose wisely, and all will be set right." Death had ruined the Ashford name. Now Leaner was the last bargaining chip left. When the coach finally lurched to a stop outside the Copper Ridge Hotel, Leaner stepped down into blinding sunlight. Dust clung to her fine traveling dress, perfect for Boston parlors, painfully out of place here. The air smelled of horses, wood smoke, and heat. The town looked half asleep, weathered buildings leaning into the wind, paint bleached pale by years of merciless sun. Then she saw them. Across the street, outside the saloon, stood two men identical in form and feature, tall, broad-shouldered, sun-bronzed and solid as the land itself. The Chamberlain twins. They were nothing like the refined gentlemen she had imagined. These men looked carved from dust and iron, more outlaw than suitor. When they turned in unison, their gazes cutting through the haze to find her, Leaner froze. One removed his hat, revealing sandy hair and eyes as blue as a summer sky. His smile was easy, confident, almost familiar. The other didn't move. His eyes were darker, sharper, filled with a quiet intensity that made Leaner's breath catch. For one suspended moment, the whole town seemed to hold still. "Miss Ashford," Your room's ready, the hotel keeper said, breaking the spell. Blainer followed him inside, though she could feel the twins' eyes on her back. That night, she lay awake listening to Copper Ridge breathe boots on the boardwalk, laughter spilling from the saloon, wind whispering through the shutters. Boston had been safe and predictable. This place pulsed with danger and promise. By morning, Blainer dressed with care in a dark green traveling suit. When she learned the Chamberlain brothers frequented the feed store, she squared her shoulders and went to meet them on her own terms. They were impossible to miss. Up close, they seemed even larger, radiating quiet strength. The one with blue eyes looked up first. "Miss Ashford," he said, his voice deep and warm. "Word travels fast in Copper Ridge." She swallowed. "My father sent me to deliver a letter." He took it gently. "Cal Chamberlain," he said. "This is my brother, Jacob." Jacob inclined his head, his gaze steady and searching. "You've come a long way from Boston," Caleb said after reading the letter. "Your father's asking a great deal." "I make my own choices," Lena replied, straighter now. Jacob's lips curved faintly. "Good. Out here, only strong choices last." That evening, a wagon brought her to the Chamberlain ranch, 2 solid stories of timber rising from rolling grassland, cattle grazing as far as the eye could see. Over a simple dinner, the truth emerged. "We don't divide what we build," Caleb said quietly. "If someone joins our family," Jacob added, "it's for life." The leaner understood then. This was no business arrangement. It was an offer of belonging, hard-earned and unwavering. Days later, standing on the hotel porch at sunrise, Leaner knew she was no longer the same woman who had arrived in Copper Ridge. When Caleb returned for her, she did not hesitate. Back at the ranch, the land spread endlessly before her, wild, demanding, alive. "I won't be a bargain," she said. "If I stay, it's because I choose this life." Jacob stepped closer. "Then make it yours." Caleb smiled, relief softening his features. "That's all we ever wanted." As the sun sank below the horizon, Leaner stood between them, the prairie wind lifting her hair. She had come west to escape ruin, but found purpose, strength, and a family forged by choice, not obligation. The land stretched on, untamed and beautiful. And for the first time, Leaner Ashford knew exactly where she belonged.